You're listening to I Love It When, and I'm your host, Mo. I'm a speaker, coach, and connector. You're in the right place if you're looking for some inspiration and you're ready to truly embrace who you are. My intention with this podcast is to help you see that you are so much more powerful than you realize. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of I Love It When. I'm your host, Mo, and today I have the pleasure of introducing you to a friend of mine, Crystal Novak. I met Crystal through a friend of mine, Amanda Gale, and I was immediately struck by her energy, her straightforward way of speaking and sharing, and her ability to connect to spirit and share what she was sensing and knowing. And so whenever I meet someone that I feel like would add value to my audience, I am definitely drawn to have them on my podcast. And I think, like most of you know now, if you've been listening for a while, my podcast is definitely intuitively led, which means that sometimes I don't know who my guest is going to be that week or the next month. It's very much dependent upon what I'm feeling and sensing in the moment. So one of the things I want to be sure to mention that we didn't have a chance to actually talk about on this episode was I want to be clear. When it comes to psychics, people are often afraid that a psychic's going to look at you and know or see everything all at once in your mind. And I just want to reassure you that that is not true. Psychics don't walk around looking into everyone's mind and reading it. Every psychic that I've met and trusted and had a reading with or worked with, that isn't something that they want at all. Can you imagine walking around every day and doing that? Like, that would be exhausting. So I believe the best psychics are the ones that explain that they can't just read your energy without your permission, and they cannot predict the future. You have free will. So I wanted to make sure to mention that at the beginning because that's something that Crystal and I didn't have a chance to touch on in this episode. So here's the 411 on Crystal. Here's her bio. I am a healer, which I utilize by being a psychic and an energy worker. The information I receive psychically comes from spirit and from whatever source that is appropriate for the person I'm working with. That can be from passed on loved ones, angels, teachers, masters, guides, your or my higher self, and so on. I share this information with you so that you may incorporate it into your life experience and be able to take steps to heal whatever has been brought to the surface during this work. While I have had these gifts since I was a small child, I kept them to myself once I realized others didn't have these assets and to keep myself safe. In my early 20s, I began to slowly open to others about my abilities using more discernment than I had as a child. Additionally, I began the long process of doing my own interpersonal healing from childhood trauma. I continue to do that to this day as I have realized I can't give what I don't have, and I can't take another where I haven't been. The more internally clear I become, the greater clarity I can use to express my abilities and become even more proficient in their expressions. I am called to service to support others who are looking to gain their own clarity and integration of self. I feel honored to witness and to be a part of another's healing journey. It is what I am here to do. Divine intervention and support appeared in the form of a channeled meditation/study group, which was channeled and led by an ascended master. This class met weekly for 35 years. I gained tremendous knowledge, tools, and experience through experience, which I continue to utilize and share. I'm currently working on creating a platform to share this knowledge. So in today's episode, we talk about how Crystal first came to notice her connection with spirit and then how she continued to develop those gifts, the difference between a psychic, a medium, and an energy healer, and why it can be hard to come out of the spiritual closet. And then lastly, how to develop and work with your intuition. So I'm really excited for you to listen to this episode today. If any questions come out after listening to Crystal and I talk about this, please do not hesitate to reach out to me or to reach out to Crystal directly. She is very available and loves connecting with people. So I'm going to put all of her information in the show notes. And of course, you're welcome to reach out to me via email, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all the different ways. Enjoy this episode. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of I Love It When. Today is a very special episode because I get to introduce you to my friend, Crystal Novak. Crystal, thank you so much for being here. I want you to just start off by telling people a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, first, thank you for having me on your podcast.
You're welcome.
It was really giddy when you sent me the invite in the email. It was fantastic. Okay, about me. Well, I consider myself to be a healer, and how that is supported is the fact that I'm psychic and a medium, and I also do energy work. So how does those things juxtapose with being a healer? By the mediumship and the psychic ability, I get information for whoever the person is I'm working with. And that information comes from source, and that source can also include angels, past on loved ones, guides, teachers, masters, my higher self, your higher self, um, what's ever appropriate in the moment. And pardon me. And then when I share that information, it helps the person I'm working with. They're getting new information, guidance, support, validation of their own experience. Also me being able to sit as witness, which it's somebody sitting with you and they acknowledge that they see you for who you are in the moment and that they're hearing your story or hearing your situation, and they're open to that and open to being with you, not trying to fix it, not trying to downplay it, just being with you in that moment. And for me, when we have a perceptual shift, when we get that information and we can shift, then our whole reality shifts, because our external reality is a reflection of our internal reality. So whatever we have going on out in here plays out in the exterior world. So when I heal something in here, then it shows up externally as well. So that is my divine mission.
Yes.
To be of assistance and to help people be able to clear and get to a better place so that they can become more integrated, more congruent, more authentic with who they actually are.
I love that. We're going to have to dig into that more. I'm going to like add that to my list of questions because I know a lot of people have questions about that concept for if it's brand new to them, maybe that how you are on the inside is a reflection of what's happening around you.
Yes.
But to begin today, can you also share a little bit about when you first began to notice this connection that you had to spirit, to this unseen?
I was a little girl.
Yeah.
And didn't realize it, but I've always, at that point, because when you're a little kid, everything's normal to you because you don't have any point of reference. So everything's
Yeah.
right. Even the weirdest stuff is normal. But I was very, very curious about everything, and I still am. I call myself terminally curious. And so I'm wandering around pondering everything. Like I see a dead bird on the ground, and I remember squatting down and looking at it like, oh, that's a dead bird. It doesn't move anymore. And just looking at the colors of it, it was a goldfinch. Looking at its colors and its little tiny feet, and just having that experience wash over me, and then moving back into whatever I was doing in my life at that moment. And as I got a little bit older, then more information would come to me, a knowingness about different things. The story I like to tell is I was part of a little bluebird group, and probably dating myself there, but whatever. So there's brownies and Girl Scouts, and then there's bluebirds and campfires.
Yes. My mom always wanted me to be a brownie. She always did.
Okay.
I couldn't make her dreams come true, though.
Well, you turned out to be an awesome Girl Scout, even as it is, and I love the fact that
Thank
you're
you.
grinning right now as we're talking about it. So, so they had a birthday party for my fellow Bluebirdian, and I think I was like 6, maybe 7, and she began unwrapping her presents, and she got this one present, and as she unwrapped it, it was a big box, then another box, and another box, and she's unwrapping them, and she gets to the last one, and she's starting to unwrap it, and I just blurt out, it's a silver dollar. It was a silver dollar. Her mother looked at me and I saw this whole range of stuff go across her face, like, how in the world do you know that?
Yeah.
You just ruined my surprise. I don't like you anymore. And just like I said, this whole flurry of stuff across her face. Well, at that point, I just started to get the high sign here. I need to keep more of this to myself. growing up in a vastly traumatic home environment, most of my skills I used to read the room, to read the energy about what was going on, um, and how to try and keep myself safe.
Hmm.
And keeping myself safe was keeping myself small and avoiding um, my parents interacting with me as much as possible because it just
Hmm.
really was not safe nor pleasant. Um, so as I got older, still kept it to myself. Sometimes I would just know stuff in school, whatever. And then in my mid 20s, once I left home and started meeting different kinds of people, more people than what you normally meet in your high school. I mean, it's kind of a limited
Yeah.
community. And then once you get out on your own, then it's a much larger community. Um, and began connecting with more like-minded kindred people. And part of that mostly was in the gay and lesbian community.
Hmm.
Um, and there's a lot of people that in that community are also spiritually gifted. So it's
Hmm.
kind of making inroads that way, and also pursuing mm, different avenues to gain more knowledge about myself and what this is about. And
Yeah.
astrology happened to be one of those
Okay.
modalities that I was exploring. And I was really amazed at how much it gave me information about myself. And there was a place finally where I was getting information.
Hmm.
Um,
Would you say then that like most of your giftings as a kid and in your 20s was the knowingness, was just knowing things like the silver dollar? Was it not so much like people talk about seeing spirit or hearing spirit? Was it more just the knowing, or was it a mix of everything?
it was kind of a mix.
Okay.
And
I asked
I,
that for people listening, but I also asked that for myself, all of you
oh,
that are listening, because I totally identify and resonate with your curiosity. I've been curious since I can remember being alive, and I realized that that's a big piece of it. And because I've always been curious about if I can actually see things and I just don't realize it, and so I've always wondered about how people develop that.
so the developing of it, okay, that's kind of a two-parter. So it was a knowingness for a lot of it. Stuff just gets into my head, and I used to think it was me, but as I've gotten older, I realized no, it's actually spirit communing with me
Yeah.
and giving me insight and giving me like, hey, ponder this thought for a while.
Hmm.
Um, and also getting in touch with, we also get a lot of information like body sensation, uh, experience something at a specific place in our body, um, emotional responses to stuff. So it's multi-layered. And what I find is I'll get the information and then I try it on. What would that feel like?
Hmm.
Then it really gets me into rapport with the person I'm working with because I can feel what it would feel like to have that particular thing that's either happened to them or they're
Hmm.
currently experiencing. And that makes it another way to, it helps explain it because I have to
Yeah.
translate it all. It's in my head, but I still have to get it out and translate it. Um,
Hmm.
and I never thought about, I never put any limitations on it. It's like, oh yeah, I can go over there and get that information, or I can ask that information, or yeah, I can talk to people that have passed on. It never occurred to me that, oh, that's a medium, or you can't go to the
Hmm.
Akashic records unless you say a certain prayer. It just, that never occurred to me that that was a thing.
Yeah.
So it's pretty wide open, with the exception of the fact that I do not accept information unless it's coming through the divine. I
Okay.
don't want, uh, it's like, unless you're working with the light, don't bother coming into my space. Don't bother
Hmm.
trying to give me information because, sorry, no, access denied. That's no, not allowed.
Yeah.
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 And I don't know how much I actually answered all that question, but anyways, there we are.
No, that was really good. Um, I wonder too that, so my next question definitely kind of leads from this one. Can you tell or mention a little bit more about what it means, the difference between a psychic, a medium, and an energy healer for people that are new to those titles or names?
Well, here we go. I think the word psychic now, probably most people say intuition, intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
A medium is someone who just goes into a trance state. Another word for that is a channel. I can I it's a very, 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 very light trance state for me when I'm
Mm-hmm.
working with someone. If I'm There are times when I'll be working with a larger energy that will come through, and I'm still staying present. I know channels who totally leave and let that energy come through them. They take on different mannerisms, different speech patterns, voice inflection, everything. It's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Energy worker. Well, everything's made out of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And the first principle in the laws of energy that govern this plane and all the other planes is we live in a universe based on thought. So if I use my thought, my will, I can focus on helping somebody move energy or work with energy. So if somebody sits down and says, "Man, I got this thing right here in the side of my head, it always hurts." My first inclination is I want to look at that psychically or on an energy level and look to see what that is. And what information comes about that. Be like, wow, did you have like a sports injury or get whacked on the side of the head there? Because there's some old heavy energy sitting there, and they'll be like, yeah, I was in a soccer game one time and, blah, blah, blah. Or, like, I've got this thing here. I'm like, it looks like someone grabbed you when you're a little kid and just shook you really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And the person will, A, be astounded that how do you know that? And B, usually they'll tear up and cry because it's like, oh my God, I'd forgotten about that. Or you see that and that happened, and you're talking about it like it's a normal thing.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there's that validation that that was your experience and that happened, and you're not making it up. It's not some weird random thing. It's true.
Yeah.
And that's so incredibly healing to have that happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's exactly what got me the first time I had that experience happen where somebody called out something in me and just the validation that I got from it. And that's why now when I talk about energy healing on the podcast or with people just in day-to-day life who've never heard of it and they're telling me about some issue they're having with their body, I will always now bring up like, well, have you considered alternative healing? Have you heard about energy healing? And most of the time people are still like, no, not at all. But occasionally now, I think more and more people are starting to hear about it because you can't deny the thing that like for something to come out of your mouth and you know nothing about me and I've just met you. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a whole, it just blows my mind the amount of information that a lot of people have never been exposed to. We were never exposed to growing up. It was not something that was taught in school.
Right.
And it's so real. Yeah.
And that kind of leads me to the statement of, what do I mean when I say I'm psychic? It's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
saying I'm a flower. There's hundreds of different flowers out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my own brand of psychic, and that's what I'm calling it. And part of the reason I'm saying that is there are medical intuitives,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the way their gift works, is they can look at you on that level and talk to you about stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there's far more of us that are gifted and have these abilities. They're just underdeveloped.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When would you say that it's beneficial for someone to enlist the help of an energy healer or a medium or psychic? This question came to me as I was thinking about questions, other questions I wanted to ask you today. And I thought this is a good one because a lot of the people that I work with have never experienced a psychic or a medium or an energy healer before. And so I'm oftentimes the person that presents them with that opportunity because I've just seen so much healing myself from it. And it's such an integral part of my life now and my business. I can't help but share things with people that have brought me joy and helped heal me. And so I know there's somebody who's listening who's like, well, should I talk to someone? And what, yeah, when would you think it would be beneficial?
Probably anytime, but I'm a little bit
Mm-hmm.
biased. Um, but if you have a reoccurring pain, a reoccurring
Mm-hmm.
feeling, a reoccurring ache, a reoccurring kind of like dark cloud that you find yourself walking around in.
Mm-hmm.
Something that simply is not going away.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. I believe that we squish a lot of our emotional experiences down and a lot of physical experiences down because many of us grow up in environments where we're not supported to have those experiences, and or our caretakers don't know how to teach us anyways because they're stuck in their stuff. And
Yeah.
so we tend to push a lot of stuff down. So you can't destroy energy. You can transmute it and transform it, but you can't destroy it. So when we shove that stuff down, it's not allowing to flow anymore. It's stuck. And um it kind of creates a jam in the system, like a paper jam in a printer. The printer wants to
Mm-hmm.
print and you're sending, hey, print this, and it can't.
Yeah.
So it's how do I unjam that printer? And that can be a multi-layered thing. You might
Mm-hmm.
start with the pain, and then it's like, okay, so what's associated with the pain? What's tied behind that? What's going on there? What happened?
Mm-hmm.
And also for patterns in your life. How many car accidents have you been in? Hello.
Mm-hmm.
How many times have you hurt yourself and it can, all the time? Yeah, looking at patterns that can also indicate there's something that needs to be addressed, that's calling out for help. And it might not be in the healthiest expression possible, but it's still a call for help.
Mm-hmm. So when you're with someone, you can see like stuck energy in their body. What does that look like to you? Do you see something in your head, or is it just a knowing of like there's something stuck in your right shoulder?
It's a knowingness, and it's like just an immediate pull to go to that area. So it's a
Okay.
knowingness that's it's literally calling my attention to it.
Okay.
And part of this whole thing is a shift in focus. It's like right now we're talking and I'm looking at you through a Zoom lens. You're looking at me. I can see the color of your shirt. I can see your office walls and everything. I'm aware of my environment, noises here, noises where you are. But what I'm focusing on is the dialogue we're having and coming up with my answers to you.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm using my abilities, it's a shift in focus. It's like
Okay.
not focusing on any other stimuli at this moment. I'm drawing all my attention to here, opening that line. You don't have to dial 9 for an outside line anymore. It's direct. And then allowing that flow to come through, that energy information to come through. So yeah.
Okay. That's fascinating. I love asking those kinds of questions because I think because my mind is so curious, I'm always like, how does it happen really? And so much of it is just intuitive. There's not really nobody has the same process, right?
Right.
Everybody's got something different.
And that's why we're all a different flower. That's why it's hard to just say, well, I'm a this, I'm a that,
Yeah.
because that's how I experience it and that's how it works for me. But other people's experiences and how they facilitate and use their gifts might be a little bit different.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I also wanted to talk with you a little bit about how difficult it can be coming out of the spiritual closet or whatever people call it, because I've definitely experienced this myself, and you and I have had many conversations about this, and for a lot of people it's just difficult to talk about and to almost like open up about it, and you have to get to that place in order to continue to build on your gifts and to really and to heal. And so what do you think it is that keeps people back the most? Is it just the fear in general of what other people are going to think?
I think that's a big piece of it. I think that many of us grow up in an environment where love is conditional and we are not loved for the entirety of who we are. And a lot of times our caretakers don't have those tools or those abilities.
Hmm.
But as children, we don't know that. So we want them to love us. We want them to love us. And they're telling us, okay, if you stay inside this particular box, then you'll get conditional love.
Hmm.
So as we get older and when this gift comes on board, it defies explanation. It doesn't fit into any tidy little thing. Um, and a lot of times, the activation or the onboarding of that gift coming online we have to start healing and doing our own internal healing work so that we can become cleaner to that gift, functioning more proficiently.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm struggling with wanting my parents to love me and wanting their approval and appreciation and recognition, and I know I'm only going to get it in this very minute space, and even then it's questionable whether I'll get it or not, because what's the flavor of the day? Have I met the criteria? Is it actually going to happen or not?
Mm-hmm.
Versus me being true to my authentic self and having these truths and these abilities start to come online. It creates this schism of, wow, if I own this and say it out loud, then I already know my family's going to like lose their mind about it, because they're not doing any kind of work. They're not going to want to see this. They're just going to want to use their coping mechanisms to get me to shut up and not talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you distill that down, it's the fear of being cast out.
Mm-hmm.
In our society, there's not really any space for that as well. And depending on what you grew up with, or perhaps the religious focus around you, now you're talking to the devil or you're practicing witchcraft. And so now you're going against the divine, which is such an irony because he's talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so again, that's this other dynamic about, oh my God, I'm going up against all the stuff that we're taught not to do, because if you step outside the box, then you are subject to penalties. And
Mm-hmm.
depending on where you are in the world, those penalties can be something as simple, still devastating, as being shunned, all the way up to being killed,
Mm-hmm.
depending on where you are and what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think many of us have a lot of past lifetimes where we were hurt or executed for expressing these abilities. Um, Unless you were aligned with the power of the day,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you got a pass. But overall, yeah, I think that's another reason why it's scary, because you're pointing to something that you can't prove exists, and you're saying, but it's happening to me. It's real. It's happening to me, and everybody's like, maybe you need some meds, or they're implying that you're crazy. They're implying
Mm-hmm.
that you have lost it and you're no longer part of the group that your bio roots are in. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
a big piece of it. And then who do you go talk to? You have
Mm-hmm.
to go find your spiritual tribe, your kindred spirits, and make those connections. And then once you start doing that, then of course everybody, you're like, oh, there's all this validation because you're spending
Yeah.
time with these people that are doing the same stuff, their own way. But still,
Yeah.
there's an underground community, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
It's becoming more and more present,
Mm-hmm.
more open. The
Mm-hmm.
fact that Marianne Williamson is basically standing in front of the entire population wanting to run for president,
Yeah.
and whether she gets it or not, she's still making a statement and still speaking her truth out loud,
Yeah.
which many of those precepts are part and parcel of being spiritual and healing
Mm-hmm.
and healing. Um, so I think
Yeah.
that, yeah.
It's encouraging seeing more and more people talk about it, because I think when you hear yourself speak about it and you start to get more comfortable with it, and then you hear other people, truth has a certain vibration. And so when people say something, I can literally feel the truth in it, or feel if it's not true, if it's lying or if it's manipulation or something, you can feel it. And so I think that's the part that's been so helpful, is hearing more and more people speak out loud about it. There's no hiding from it, and people are getting more exposure to it, and then you resonate with whatever it is they're saying. Even if I've had people come up to me who are like, I don't know why I need to meet you, but I need to hear you talk about this. Can you please tell me about this? And that's
Yes.
been really exciting to see that happen more and more, because when people find that and I have that ability to kind of break into their own truth, then they find so much more peace, and then they can't help but talk about it because you feel so much better. Yeah.
Yes. And when I first met you, that was exactly the feeling I had, was you were so true.
Thank you.
And that just, yeah, that just came right. I mean, just sitting with you, I'm like, this is awesome. I just met this person, but she is so comfortable. She's so centered. She's so in the moment. And she's just focused on me. And there's no agenda here. She's just a genuine person in this moment. And I was like, dang, this is awesome. I'm so glad I met you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I definitely felt the same way
And you
about
can
you.
see
And
that person.
oh,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah. Mhm.
I mean, it feels so good. Again, I can't, I've always told people, I mean, if you don't like me, that's okay. I'm not for everybody. And I can't stop doing this. I can't stop being in the truth because it feels so freaking good. Feels so right. It feels so authentic. And it
Yes.
feels like this is what I'm meant to do. This is what I think we're all meant to do, is truly be our true selves.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. And the level of peace that comes with that
Hmm.
can't be understated. When you come in alignment with yourself and you come on board with that's just who you are and you are accepting of that, um, there's just so much peace that comes with it.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
undeniable. Hey, I'm popping in for a moment to let you know that if you're interested in working with me one on one in a small group, or you'd like to attend one of my upcoming retreats, please reach out or add yourself to my email list. You can go to iloveitwhen.org and scroll to the bottom where you'll see there's a spot to sign up. I also love to speak, teach, and create experiences for small, medium, or large size companies. If you know someone that I should know, please connect us. I'm looking to utilize I Love It When to create global change, and that will require collaborating with all of you. You're all so much more powerful than you realize. Remind yourself of that today.
Hmm.
With your business, Open Heart Path business, can you talk a little bit
Hmm.
about how you decided to open that and when you started officially like giving readings for people and doing energy work and all of that?
Well, I've been doing it under the table for years, probably about 40 years. Um, and periodically there's been a couple different times I've like made an attempt at it to step out into it and do it as a business, but I needed to do more healing first before that actually happened. Um, so in doing my work with myself, the universe and I talked about it, and we had a deal that when I got to a certain age where my finances, I wouldn't have to worry about them so much, then I could pursue this as a full-time thing. So I started before I hit that age by participating in the metaphysical wellness fairs that are offered by Lorelei Shamayo. Um, and that was, God, kind of mid-COVID, just when we were allowed to
Okay.
start going back out, but you had
Hmm.
to show proof of vaccination. Everybody was still masked up and stuff like that. Um, and that was my official stepping out into that place. And the fun part for me was I was like, okay, so I gotta have a name for my business. What am I gonna call it? There's so many things out there. And I'm laying in bed and I'm starting to have these thoughts as I go to sleep. And this voice just goes, Open Heart Path. And I'm like, oh, well then, thank you. That solves that question. And it's just so true because I really believe that to have an open heart is the most important thing that we can have.
Hmm.
It's the gateway to everything to me. So I'm like, perfect. No one has that name. I looked it up. Um, and so that's how I got my business named, and that's how I started the official push to be out there. Yeah.
Okay. So then you've been doing these metaphysical wellness fairs, and that's kind of how people have found you and met you through.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the next push for me is stop being so small and really stepping out into it and owning it. And that took some more work as well. because it wasn't safe to be seen. And so I've been doing work around it's fine to be seen, showing up 100%, and doing that clearing work. So what's next on the agenda for me is the process of building my YouTube channel. And then I'm going to have content on that channel where I'm going to talk about all the different information that I've learned, the experience that I've had of incorporating that information and the tools it's created. And it'll be a format to share those tools and experiences and information with the intent of people becoming their own masters, self-mastery, how to master oneself, how to come from a place of discernment and from detachment. And detachment doesn't mean you don't have your emotions and your feelings or anything like that. It means that you are in a place of observation and not responding from reactionary place. You're responding from a place of discernment, of mindfulness, generosity of spirit, compassion, and holding boundaries at the same time. So depending on what internal work you need to do, that can be a relatively lifelong process. Yeah. And pretty much probably is.
Yeah. Cool. Can you talk a little bit about your experience working with the group that you were with for 30 to 35 years? That's an incredible amount of work and just time that you dedicated to learning and
Yeah.
growing.
Yeah. So in like the mid 80s, I'd done therapy and I was still doing therapy. But I was looking for alternative ways to practice therapy, and neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP for short, was a thing going on at that time. And so I was taking a training class in that. And in the process, one of the women that was taking that class, we struck up a friendship. And she told me she was going to this newly formed metaphysical group that was a channeled group. And she said, I think you'd really like it. So I was like, okay, curious me. And at that point, the new age thing was really like kicking the doors wide open. That's when all the crystal shops opened and all the metaphysical bookstores came on board, and people were talking about channeling and doing Reiki and meditating, and the harmonic convergence was going to be happening during that time. And there was just this big influx of that. So I was like, yeah, that's my bread and butter. I can eat that all day long. So I was very interested. So I went, and I felt like I'd come home, just sitting there and listening to the ascended master who was speaking. So this class was channeled by Ruth Craig, and she could become an unconscious channel. She would set herself aside and basically become an open conduit for an ascended master whose name is Katumi. And so Katumi would come forth and we would have a meditation. And then he began to teach us about a lot of different things. And so the stuff we learned about was our chakras, the rays, which are colors that create different vibrational situations, learning about the 7 principles and laws of energy, which is also referred to as Hermetic doctrine. Kabbalah, working with the tree of life. Working with our consciousness, working with our parts, our aspects, the 4 bodies that we have, how to clear false beliefs and clear our consciousness. Going and working with our chakras. So it's kind of like being in a little mini university every Friday for 35 years. And that kept going. There was times where geographically I couldn't participate, but I was still in touch with people that were in the group, and so we'd be talking, and I'd find out that I was tracking just in my own personal life with what was happening with what was going on in the class. And there was no pressure. You could come as often as you want, come once, come never, didn't care what you looked like, didn't care what you were wearing, didn't care if you're rich, didn't care if you're poor. All the interest was is if you would show up and do the work.
Mhm.
That was the only, that was it.
Yeah. I love what you said at the beginning about you felt like it was home
Hmm.
because, and I just want to share this in case anybody else has ever felt this way, but I'll never forget when I was first introduced to this whole world. I always had an interest in psychics and I didn't know why. But I knew, I mean, initially, I know now that I was pulled for this reason so that I would investigate more and get curious more. I just knew that I was like, how do they know what's going to happen in the future? How can, and then I found out that that was not actually a thing. But it all pulled me in. And then I worked with someone who read fairy cards and somebody had asked me, like, what's going on here? You seem to like be getting into all this woo woo stuff. You're like talking to people about fairies. And I said, and at that time, I wasn't church shopping anymore, but I went through this period in my life for a couple years where I was hopping around to different churches in the Seattle area looking for a home because
Yeah.
I just figured I grew up Catholic. I had experience in a number of different denominations, and I had not yet walked into a space where I felt like I was home. And so I remember saying to this person, all I can tell you is this feels more like home to me than I have ever been, other than my own immediate home with my immediate family. This feels like home. And
Yes.
and for anybody who's listening who's like has had an interest or a pull towards anything around what we've been talking about, I just want to reassure you that there's a reason you feel that way, like, and to not invalidate your feelings because your body and your soul are literally trying to talk to you all the time. So I love that you said that because it's such a familiar feeling, but at the same time, I just remember disregarding so many different feelings I would get all the time and just thinking, oh, I'm just overly emotional. Oh, I just have a big heart and I care about people a lot. Oh, I must be feeling so. No, this is messages constantly.
Yes.
Yeah. So I love that you said that. Like it was calling to you. And there's, it's also just, I think, interesting for people to hear about how messages make their way through different humans, like
Mhm.
Katumi, how the messaging got through your friend Ruth to all of you. It's fascinating. So for someone who's just like starting to learn about their intuition, what would you recommend that they do to start to build that connection with themselves and with the divine?
Believe that it's true.
Yeah.
Believe that it's true. And I would journal.
Okay.
I would just write stuff down and especially the date, because then like a week goes by, a month goes by, 6 months go by. You can go back and kind of see like where you were and what happened and where you are now versus where you were then.
Mm,
Um, it comes it comes to us, each of us, in different ways. So there's not any one specific way to say that this is how you're going to experience it.
mm,
Uh, that little voice or those nudges that we get, the intuition. Um, I'm out to my vehicle and I'm ready to leave, and the little voice says, "Hey, you should go back in and get the XYZ thing because you're going to wish you had it." And I'm like, "I'm already in the car. I don't want to go back in the house." And they're like, "Okay." Get to where I'm going, and I'm like, "Damn it." Yeah, I should have gone back in the house and got the one thing that I was looking for.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things, we get these nudges like you're thinking about so and so and they call you, text you, email you. You get a sense that something's going to happen right in the next immediate thing, and it happens. It's like paying attention to those feelings. And
Hmm.
was it like a knowingness? Was it this feeling in your gut? Was it like, did you get goosebumps?
Hmm.
Um, we get confirmation a lot, like certain animals will show up, coins, feathers. A song comes on over in the grocery store that's really specific, and you haven't heard it in 20 years, and it totally relates to whatever's going on in your life right now. Um, we are tied into the divine 24/7. This whole place, this earth school that we live in, it's all created by the divine, We are individuated pieces of the divine. We are
Mhm.
not separate from this living tapestry that we are part of. So we can get feedback whenever we want it. It's just practicing and training ourselves to pay attention to it, because there's lots of things that we do to distract ourselves.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And a lot of that is the mental and working with the mental, so that you can step aside and go, oh, that's not me. That's my mind doing that. I am not my mind. It's my mind is doing things. But we tend to think we are our mind. And so we discount a lot of what's happening around us because the mind's not comfortable with that. It doesn't like it. It's
Yeah.
challenging a lot of our earlier programming. And the mind says, oh no, you don't want to step over there. That's not safe.
Yeah.
If we start doing that, then bad things might happen to us. People might not like us anymore. And then it's game on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You remind me of how too that we're just this in Western society, especially we've so many years now, business and the way we live has been built off this very logical left-brained way of being. And it's also very much more masculine type energy. And so this leaning into the divine feminine and leaving into the unknown and this other does make your human self just freak out. Just
Yeah.
what? This is not what we were taught. We were taught that 1 + 1 = 2, period. The end.
Yeah. And then if you want to go that further, then remember when you learned about negative numbers, it's like,
Yeah.
what? That's a thing? How could that be a thing? Um, yes. So what somebody shared with me was the mind thinks it's the gardener, but it's actually the shovel. We are the gardener. We are the creator of cause. We are the controlling identity. We're the driver of the car, if you will.
Mhm.
The mental likes to think it's all those things and that it should be driving the car. And it's like, no, honey, you have a purpose. The mental serves us in specific ways. The emotional serves us in specific ways. Our physical
Yeah.
body serves us in specific ways, but none of those are in charge. We are greater than the sum of all our parts.
Mhm.
Yeah. So part of this whole
Mhm.
process is how to work with the mental so that it wants to keep us distracted all the time,
Mhm.
and it makes it hard to hear.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a random question come to me as we were chatting these last few minutes, and it was just, do you have a message for the audience, for people that are listening right now in general? Anything that you feel called to share, talk about?
I would sit down with your fear. All the stuff that
Ooh.
you're afraid of, write it all down. Write it all down. And then we were told, invite your fear to tea. So basically, you, the controlling self, you sit down and you call that fear up and you talk to the fear. What are you afraid of? And then you start showing that fear that all the things you're afraid of, majority of it hasn't even happened and isn't going to happen.
Mhm.
But that's a distraction. Fear keeps us looped in a negative mindset, as opposed to when we say, fear, I hear you, you have an appropriate place. Like fear does have an appropriate place,
Mhm.
but these bodies are hardwired from a primitive brain, and that's what we keep focusing on is the fear.
Mhm.
What do they call it? The negative bias. We have
Mhm.
60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. How many of them are positive?
Mhm.
So we have this dialogue going all the time in the background. So if this is where if for those who are listening and you're wanting to move forward in your own personal growth, sitting down with your fear is going to be one of those biggest steps that you can take. And that can take lots of different forms, lots of
Mhm.
different forms. Fear has a purpose, it serves, but not when it's out of control and trying to grab the wheel and drive the car. It never ends well.
Yeah. I like that. Invite your fear to tea.
Yeah.
That might be the title of this episode.
Oh,
It's
cool.
kind of
Okay.
perfect.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
for people that are listening, what's the easiest way to find you and book an appointment with you?
Oh, you can go to my website. It's called
Okay.
openheartpathllc.com.
Okay.
And that's probably
The
the
easiest.
easiest way. Yeah, because
Okay.
contact form on there. There's information on there, like I make my statement about myself and what I do. There's some background. There's different things that are on the page that are written. That was where I was first going, but I am since getting guidance about moving that part of the page into an actual platform on YouTube. So, and
Okay.
eventually my YouTube page will be The Open Heart Path.
Okay. So people can
And
search for that to follow you on YouTube too.
yeah, not
Okay.
right now,
Soon.
but soon. Yeah, it's coming. Yeah,
Okay.
good. Thank you. Great question.
Yeah, totally. Um, Let me
Oh,
think. Yeah.
and I also participate in the local metaphysical
That's what I was
wellness
going to
center.
ask. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. So if you go to MeWe, which is MEWE.com, you'll get
Hmm.
their homepage and
Hmm.
it'll show you where those events are happening. And it's in the greater Pacific Northwest. I live in the Washington, Seattle area, so I participate in the more local ones. I'm not going down to Oregon and doing the fairs there, but some of your listeners might be in that area and they can
Hmm.
avail themselves of going to these events. They're a blast because
Hmm.
it's all about spirituality in all its many forms.
Yes.
And there's all different kinds of participants there that are card readers, healers, Reiki people, massage people, astrological, different modalities of collecting and sharing information. There's vendors selling different things. And then people are also doing lots of talks throughout the day.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I highly recommend checking those out. This particular podcast episode will drop around the beginning of December, so I know there's some coming up in December, January, February that you'll be at. And
Mhm.
just to remind people that are listening too, if you're not in Washington State, Crystal does do virtual sessions, so you can
Yes.
do virtual energy healing over Zoom, over the phone. So I want you to know that if you're listening, you're on the East Coast, and you're like, but I really want to meet with Crystal. You still can. You totally can.
Yes.
It works just the same.
It
So.
does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely check out her website and check out her YouTube and keep an eye on for when it pops up. Is there anything else you want to share? I feel called to share that just as a side note, Crystal was a contractor for many, many years in the real estate construction business. And so if you're listening and you're a small business too, and you want to bring Crystal in as a consultant who happens to have psychic and mediumship abilities, FYI, like this is this is also something that I can see her doing, and
Yes.
there's just lots of different ways that I integrate healers that I know into the business that I do to help me plan my business and make sure that I'm sticking true and following my true self within my work as well. So,
Yeah. Thank you.
yeah.
I appreciate that. That's very valid. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I list myself as a spiritual consultant. If you get a business license with the state, well, what am I going to call myself? Well, there wasn't a spot for psychic, so I went with consultant, and on my business card it says spiritual consultant. So yes, yeah,
I love that, and it makes total sense. Yeah.
mm-hmm. Yeah, totally different methodology to bring to any situation or any gathering. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, cool. Well, I like to end each episode with what's your current I love it when for the world or for your life right now? What do you think yours is?
I am immensely grateful. So I love it when I have a moment where I stop and I look around and I realize how much grace is actually in my life. And I'm very grateful when I experience myself in that flow, which the more work I do, the more and more that happens, the more I can stay present.
Mm-hmm.
So I love it when.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing today. And I'll make sure for everybody listening, I'll put Crystal's contact information in the show notes so you can reach out to her. And I just encourage you to connect with her.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the work that you're doing. You're bringing a great deal of light into the world, and I am very appreciative of that.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.